So Dallas unfortunately wasted another opportunity for 3 points and lost 1-0 to Minnesota at the Allianz Field. They dropped to 12th in the Western Conference. I think they're just ahead of LAFC by one goal difference. I think LAFC have one more goal against, or maybe one more goal, one less goal. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, LAFC is -1, and then Dallas is at 0 goal difference.
Yep. So Dallas here have only picked up 5 points in 5 games. I think for this game, interestingly, Luchi Gonzalez started the game in a 5-2-1-2 shape, instead of the, I guess, 4-2-3-1 that has worked so far. I really thought that they found the system that really worked for Luchi, the way he wants to implement, his possession heavy, utilize width and attacking style football. I thought it provided not only good attacking opportunities, but also it solidified them in the back. I guess he saw something in Minnesota that he really thought he could take advantage of this, using wingbacks to provide width, like he started the season. But this makes it the third formation used in 5 games. Quickly going about or talking about the personnel that he changed to kind of fit the shape. Matt Hedges started over Freddy Vargas, swapping a winger for a center back to form a back three when in possession. Ryan Hollingshead and Eddie Manjoma produced most of Dallas's width from the wingback position, under this new quote-unquote system. And Frank O'Hara and Jadir Obrian tucked in as central strikers. But unfortunately, it did very little trouble to a Minnesota side who, they basically shut down Dallas from, minute one. And I think this is probably one of the things that I noticed throughout the game. In the first half, I think Lucci maybe should have reverted back to the 4-2-3-1 at halftime, but of course it's easier to just say it than actually do it and be in Lucci's shoes. But it did look that they did have trouble building up against this Minnesota side. Adrian Heath did well to notice kind of maybe this numerical disadvantage that Dallas had, and he kind of swarmed the mid third, and it made it difficult for Dallas to find passing options in midfield. It seemed like every man was covered very tightly. And so let's say when the keeper had to go ahead and find a passing option, he had to revert out wide. And I don't think that Felipe, I think, has, the ability to just kind of pick out passes out wide like that at a long range. So it ended up just, resulting in possession loss, and it really cut off Dallas's creative players from really like building up play or even creating anything going forward. And I think this is one of the best ways that Minnesota could have approached the game, and it worked well. It seemed like Lucci's starting lineup really worked against him there. I'm not sure what you really took away from that first half, or really from the game, Oscar.
I think my biggest concern for Dallas is that number 9 role. I mean, I get it. Hara is like what, one of the top 6 paid players in the league, something along those lines.
That's tough. That's tough for a Dallas fan to swallow.
I mean, I find it kind of funny because I'm not saying Hara's not a good player. I pod 1, if you go back to our MLS preview, I said Hara was being underrated by Silvio, and I think Silvio was probably more right than I was. At the same time, I did say Ricardo Pepi was the second option, and I still think he is the second option. That should be the first option. So I do think Dallas has the depth that maybe like the Houston Dynamo doesn't have, and being able to do a quick fix. But for whatever reason, Luchi wants to give Hara a little bit more of a chance. I think he could get away with it for a few more games, but I think once you start getting into game like 10, 10, 11, and you find yourself like, let's say they keep the same points per game and they find themselves out of playoff seating, they're going to have to start making those tough decisions and start switching things up. But when you just look at those salaries that came out like last week,
Hmm.
like I do believe there are better players than Hara at lower payrolls, in my opinion. Like say Polito, etc.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about how Dallas came to that number, and I'm saying that without knowledge of when he was signed. Like I don't have that historical knowledge on Hara's contract, so maybe it wasn't always this high, and it was just like kind of like loyalty. I'm not entirely sure, but I do find it kind of high, and it's certainly like Dallas is the depth, so like the salary hit isn't really hurting them as much. But I do think Luchi should start Ricardo Pepe over him in the next few games if we don't see things change up too much. Next, like you mentioned, the system or the identity that they're not having because they keep switching things up
Yeah.
is hurting them a lot. Um, and you called it in your preview, I believe, like week 3 preview. That four in the back seems to work best for Lucci.
Yeah.
I think he's being a little stubborn. He really likes that five in the back or like the 3-4,
Yeah.
shape,
Hmm.
whichever one you want to call it. And I get it. I'm a big fan of that system, as you can tell from my FIFA 20 and FIFA 21 days. Nothing like the five in the back.
Oh,
Uh,
vintage
Nothing like
Oscar.
it. I truly like the tactic, and I think it could be two things. Either his team's just not suited for it, or he's not employing it properly with the players he has. I don't know whose it is. Like that's hard to tell. I just know it's not working, right? And if you have an alternative that you already found, I'm a little pressed as to why you would keep pushing for that five or like 3-4 shape. Um, doesn't make sense to me. You have something that works. If he does manage to make this five in the back work, I don't think it'll get him significantly better results than the four in the back. So I'm a little confused by the whole ordeal. But taking that aside, I do think FC Dallas still has the strongest team on paper in the Western Conference for Texas teams, right?
Hmm.
Um, Clearly, they had been underperforming. And I think this week and maybe the next week, the next two games are going to be key, I guess, like morale wise, not only for like the team, but like the fans, right?
Yeah.
If they're able to bounce back, I think the first five games are forgotten, you know?
Absolutely.
Um, then the best chance they had to do that is to go back to the system you mentioned. But like, however they do it, if they win two games back to back, or at least get good results back to back, I think the first five games are forgotten, and Lucci is kind of hailed as the manager who figured it out.
Yeah.
Then
Absolutely.
there's like if they don't win, I think we're in serious danger of losing like kind of like the fan support or like the hope
Yeah.
or like the faith into making the playoffs. I think he's going to start losing the locker room a little bit, not significantly, but it's going to start dwindling down, you know? And I think at that point, either regardless of whether he wins the next two games or whether he loses the next two games, it's going to come down to consistency. If he wins and he reverts back to the, I would say, kind of like system he prefers with that five in the back, um, we're just gonna get like a repeated cycle of this. If he keeps going back to what doesn't work out of like stubbornness, even if they do make the playoffs, I don't see them going far with that mentality of like swapping back and forth between something that works and something that doesn't work. And if they do lose the two games, but he's smart enough to switch back to what did work, the games they've won or the games they performed well so far this season, it'll be tougher, but they could certainly still make a push for the playoffs. Although it is looking increasingly difficult when you look at the standings, um, because like I know Houston is only 2 points ahead, um, but I think compared to other leagues, a win in the MLS is a lot harder to come by because all the teams, even like when you see like big teams like Seattle and like LA Galaxy and etc., they're just more beatable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Salt Lake is 2 games behind, and they already have 7 points. So I think if Seattle is not Seattle, if Salt Lake beats Dallas, on Saturday, they're gonna pretty much like cement themselves as a playoff contender. Like I don't really, I can't say they're gonna be at the top of the playoff standings or the bottom near the seventh place spot, but they'll definitely be up there. San Jose already kind of got away from Dallas. Colorado, Sporting, KC, LA Galaxy, Seattle are just miles away.
Hmm.
So FC Dallas, Austin, and Houston. All three of them are really competing for the seventh spot, in my opinion. I don't see any of them going higher, given the schedules they have in the short term and the long term, and given where they are currently right now. So and I think since Luchi's so far behind, because like that point makes a huge difference when you come like near the end of the regular season.
Hmm.
He doesn't have much room to wiggle anymore, even though it looks like it's only 5 games. Um, it's looking tough, and that's not like I just said. Like the Houston Dynamo, Austin FC Dallas are competing for the seventh spot, but like I completely neglected to mention there's other teams. There's Vancouver, Portland, and Minnesota that are fighting just as much. I just mentioned the Texas teams just because that's what we cover, but I think the top six spots, if Salt Lake is able to win, are not solidified, but are very hard to come by. So it's really like 7 teams fighting for that seventh spot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good take. I think it will come down to see which Texas team takes, that last spot in the playoffs, or maybe last couple spots. Um, but yeah, you kind of mentioned my preview to this game, and I was shocked. And I know it's kind of hard to criticize Lucci here because obviously he's a good manager, and who am I to criticize someone like Luchi Gonzalez? But while I was writing that, and I wrote that, I saw this, like, I think he used the 4-2-3-1. They came before that. They got a positive result. I thought things finally started clicking. Um, and I thought, okay, here we go. He's starting the 4-2-3-1. This is it. This is the system he's going with. Um, Hara again he didn't do much, and if anything, he cost the game against Houston. There's two chances where he could have easily slotted, like, a DP for the amount that he's earning would have easily slotted in those two goals. Again, it's tough for me to criticize someone like Hara, but someone has to do it, and it's obvious that he's like a couple steps off the pace for most of these games. So in the preview, I noted that he would have started this game against Minnesota in the 4-2-3-1 shape, again implementing Luchi philosophy and principles, but just in a different shape and a different style within the game. And also that Pepe would have started for Hara. I really think that maybe if Pepe was in this game and they started in a 4-2-3-1, it would have opened up the midfield a little more, and it could have been a solution, because looking at the game, and this is kind of super interesting to look at after the fact, is that they did take the field in a 5-2-1-2 shape, if you want to, like, make it nice for you as a picture, but do realize that they never actually end up in this shape ever throughout the match, but just to kind of like for you to visualize, for the listeners to visualize. But Minnesota completely outnumbered them in the midfield, and like I said, Dallas had trouble building up throughout the whole first half, and they relied on their keeper to ping out their wingers. But again, the keeper maybe isn't as this, or doesn't have this quality, and kept kicking the ball out of bounds, or just having trouble picking out the wide passes for the open players, because everyone in the midfield was covered. So I think that Lucci said, okay, we're being outnumbered in the midfield. And if you look at average player positions, he, I think, instructed Hollingshead to slot in from his right wingback or left wingback position, into the midfield. And then he has four midfielders. So it kind of shaped up like a 4-1-3-2, looking at average player position. And this just kind of goes to show me, like, why wouldn't Lucci just go with the 4-2-3-1 at that point? You're slotting in one of your wingbacks. You're giving up, not only are you giving up the width from one side, so now you're failing to spread your opponent wide to create space for your midfielders to be able to build up and then turn their backs and filter some creative play going forward. But also you leave Antonio Martinez open on that left side completely. So then if you look at attacking sides for Minnesota, they decided to attack when they noticed that Hollingshead was kind of tucking in as, I guess you want to call, an inverted winger into the midfield because they were having trouble there. They attacked that right side, or Minnesota attacked um their right side, which would be Austin's left, where Hollingshead tucked in 45% of the time. 45% of the time. And especially in the dying moments, we saw that side attacked over and over and over. So I'm a little bit in awe on why Lucci wouldn't start the 4-2-3-1. I get it. He probably saw something that said that providing width through wing backs would have set his team up more for success. But I think he got it wrong. And I know I hate to say it, but someone has to say it. And I think he got it completely wrong, not only in formation, but also personnel. And you know what? For me, I think Hara and Lucci have a really good relationship. Obviously, I think Hara's starting to feel the pressure from fans because he's not living up to his price tag. And Lucci's trying to, boost confidence in his DP, who I think he believes, and most of us believe, a prime Hara would really bolster this Dallas side as a top playoff contender. But it's just not working out. And then I think at times, you look at other managers who kind of have this like indifferent relationship with players. I think that kind of relationship would kind of benefit right now, because I think if Lucci went ahead and kind of sat Hara a little bit and gave the starting role to the hot hand and their homegrown Ricardo Pepi, I think that would spark something in Hara. And I think we've seen that when he did start Pepi and Hara came off the bench, he was electric. We haven't seen that Hara all season. And as soon as he comes off the bench for Pepi, we kind of see this kind of, electrified Hara. I think he had an assist that game. So moving forward, like I've said before, I think not only does I think he needs to bench Hara and let him build form through the bench, because it is hindering Dallas's performance to a point. But also, I think stick to what worked. Make adjustments throughout the game, but stick a stable system out there first, and then make adjustments. For Lucci, instead of doing, I wouldn't call it experimental, but maybe a shape that they haven't used this season yet. Um, so go stable first, and then go ahead and try something a little more if you see a tactical or weakness in the team that you can exploit with shifting your shape. Um so yeah, and honestly, he's gonna have less of those opportunities as the season goes on and he fails to get results, because not only have they been inconsistent in the way they play, but also the results of the game. And that, again, like you noted, they lose against this Salt Lake side. And I think questions are going to start coming up about Lucci and if he's the right man to carry this Dallas team. I know it's still early in the season, but they just haven't, put the score lines aside. They just haven't been very convincing. I think they've had games and moments where they've been very convincing. But I mean, if you look at the first half of this game, they were completely locked up. There was nothing they could do. Yeah, sure, they had like the odd chance here and there, but again, they've struggled with their finishing. Lucci's playmakers could not find key passes to set up teammates. They like misplaced crosses. They lost possession. They were caught off. Hara was caught off sides a bunch of times. So I think it's a little rough for Dallas going forward. But with all that said, if there is one person that can definitely turn it around, it's Lucci. And not only that, but with the depth of the squad as well. He has players to pick from that if one or two aren't performing, he could easily slot in and Dallas wouldn't skip a beat.
Definitely agree.
Yeah. Yeah. A little more about the game here. I mean, okay, so all that said, uh Dallas did keep a clean sheet against, a dangerous Minnesota side. Minnesota created a high volume of goal scoring opportunities. Um, considering the possession, they had like 45% of the ball throughout the game, but were able to create 27 total shots compared to Dallas's
Hmm.
55% possession with only 6 shots. Of course, Minnesota just passed it around in Dallas's final third. 50% of their passes were in Dallas's third. And most of this was filtered through Emmanuel Reynoso, who was the clear standout player of the game, and I think one of the most electrifying players in the league right now. He had the second most touches, consistently picked out teammates in dangerous areas, had more shots than anyone on Saturday. But like I said, despite Minnesota's performance, Luchi's side held on for the scoreless to the scoreless draw until the dying minutes of the match. And one of the things that kind of put me off here when talking about um the game was the game management by Luchi. Like towards the end of the game, you're holding on, and he made some subs too. And it was obvious that he was trying to hold on to the game. But for some reason, the back and forth action just they just kept going with the back and forth action. Dallas didn't really try to hold the ball, control the tempo, and see the game out, even though it was obvious what Luchi's changes were. That's exactly what he was trying to do. And I think this is probably one of my biggest criticisms for them this game was their lack of game management. Look, you're away, you're lacking points, you're in need of points, you're seeing a game out. There's 3 minutes left. Why are you attacking? There's so much space. They're obviously gassed and you're attacking. Control the tempo, control the ball, and see the game out. And funny enough, for Dallas, one of the back and forth actions resulted in a corner for Minnesota, and guess what? They scored from it. Right there's like a little bounce here, and I think Robin Lod poached in the game winner for Minnesota, but it shouldn't have gone to that place at all. Dallas, and I think it does fall a little bit on Lucci. He should have had better game management um in those dying minutes. Like he made the changes, but he failed to manage the game, and I think this really cost him. And he'll definitely need to go back to the drawing board here as this playoff projected team from most experts coming into the season, and now they're like bottom of the Western Conference. So, um, you know, he'll
Hmm.
hope to put this performance behind them. I think this Saturday when they do host Real Salt Lake, and what kind of feels to me like a must-win game, or maybe not in terms of result, but definitely performance.
Yeah, I think one last thing I will add, and it's maybe like posing a question to you
Hmm.
as well. We're starting to get into like what I would call the second cycle of the league, right? Because after the Salt Lake game, FC Dallas gets to play Colorado again, then they
Hmm.
get to play Minnesota again. Um, and I think those are two opportunities for Lucci to show how he's maybe a superior coach above the rest, at least within the MLS. And it will really speak volumes as to how confident fans and maybe the front office should be in him, right? Because okay, against Colorado, we had the same issue that they had against Minnesota. Minnesota just happened to capitalize on it, where he went towards that system that didn't work out, right?
Hmm.
Um, Against Minnesota, you just talked about what went wrong. It'll be interesting to see how they pivot between the first Colorado game and the second Colorado game, and the same for Minnesota. Um, and what results it gets Lucci. I think. I mean, I've talked a lot about confidence, and I usually talk about stats,
Hmm.
big deviation. But I do think more team morale and just the confidence you have in your coach's management has a lot of influence that maybe you can quantify.
Yeah.
And if he's not able to beat Colorado and Minnesota in those next two games, um, you start to question even more, like you didn't learn from your first mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I mean, I personally think Lucci's an astute manager. I think he's one of my favorites in the league. Um,
You just like how he dresses, bro. Chill,
that's not true.
chill.
Look, Even I
Look,
think
everyone, pause. Silvio literally worships this man's
that's
drip.
not true.
He said he forced me to make a picture of Lucci in the windbreaker. Like literally coerced me
I
into it. He said
literally
if you
said
don't make
I
it,
literally said one takeaway from last game was that his windbreaker was fire. That's
I thought
it.
it was like some Star windbreaker. I thought it was some hit. It was just like an FC
No,
Dallas
yeah,
windbreaker. I'm
but
like, tell me this man's not biased without telling me this man's not biased. Anyways, I just want y'all to know, like, no matter what we say about Lucci, Silvio worships him. That'll be all.
no, I mean, but that kind of helps out. Like it's hard for me to criticize, and that just kind of shows that like I think he's just got it wrong this time. And I mean, it sucks, but even I think even if he doesn't get a positive result against Real Salt Lake this weekend, I think the players do have confidence in Lucci, and I think they'll have confidence that they'll start to click sooner rather than later. But like you said, it is when you start returning against those teams. You have played them this season already. You have film. If you can't figure it out tactically, then I think that's where the problems are going to start if he doesn't get results against those two teams. I think those weeks is when you'll start seeing the questions, being asked about Lucci.
Literally, a Lucci, if you're listening to the pod, which I'm sure you do, 100%. I
We
got the Excel sheets for you. Just hit me up on Twitter. I'll give you some pointers, and we'll get you to seventh place. I can't promise first, but I'll get you to seven.
All right, so quickly before we go ahead and wrap up the pod, let's go ahead and look at Real Salt Lake a little bit and compare them to Dallas. I mean, if you want to go ahead and look at XG, um, Dallas have 6.9 right now. Real Salt Lake has 5, but of course, Real Salt Lake has one less game played than Dallas. But their XG against or allowed, I'm sorry, um, in one less game, Real Salt Lake has 4.2 compared to Dallas, who has 7.6. So that kind of tells you that, if you kind of take out the average per 90, it does tell you that, um, Real Salt Lake don't allow as many opportunities as FC Dallas there. But I think this is gonna be an interesting game for Dallas, like we've pointed out already. I mean, I think the thing that I'm gonna be waiting most on is what Lucci brings out on the pitch. I really hope it's the 4-2-3-1 because I love the way that team played, and um I think that's the system that he should stick to. I think it worked really well, and I guess against this Real Salt Lake team, I think it could really do some damage. And I would also like to see Pepe in there. I think he brings like a different element to Hara. Not necessarily better. I mean, his performance has been better, but I think he just brings something different to the team that the other players can really benefit from. And hopefully, it's a way for Hara to build a little bit of form here and there.
And I mean, if you need a third option, I'm here, Lucci. I didn't play striker, but I'll figure it out for you. No problem. I'll get you a 9 XG per game. No worries. Thank you.
Jeez. One thing that is very interesting to point out is that Real Salt Lake is at the top of dribbles, successful dribbles in the league. So they will run at the defense. And one thing that have noticed against Dallas, and you could really point out a lot of situations like Reynoso, who kind of runs at players a little more and tends to take them on, or even the game against San Jose, Cade Cowell, Cade Cowell, when he took on FC Dallas defenders, they had a tough job trying shutting those like dynamic players down. And Real Salt Lake's not a team that's gonna, pass around. They're gonna challenge defenders and head on, like go straight at them. So that's gonna be something to keep an eye on against this or in the game against Real Salt Lake.
definitely.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything more on Dallas, Oscar?
No, I'm good if you are.
Yep. All right. Oh, I think we forgot to do this in the Dynamo pod, but what would your result be for this game? What do you think the result's gonna end up being?
I'll be honest. I think Salt Lake wins 2-0.
Yeah, I think Real Salt
And
Lake.
it's not a diss to Dallas. It's just Salt Lake is such a good team.
Yeah, I think they're taking this. I think I don't know. I think maybe Dallas start with a goal, but then I think Real Salt Lake just throughout the game just dominates them. Um or just outperforms. I wouldn't want to say dominate, but just outperforms Dallas. And I think it's gonna end up being like a 3-1 a 3-1 loss for FC Dallas. It pains me to say, but I think that's going to be the result. All right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and end the pod there. You guys can find me at SPrietoJR on Twitter. Oscar, where can people find you?
Luchi, you can find me at OJ Aguilar 16 for that Excel sheet. Thank you.
Yeah, so make sure to follow us on Twitter, guys. We're always, or just tweet at us. We're always on Twitter talking all things footy. We love to see hot takes and all that good stuff. You guys can follow the pod at Final Third Pod on Twitter and Instagram, so you guys will be notified when podcasts go out. You know, podcast previews, game previews, recaps, um, all that good stuff. And you guys can also find that at finalthirdpod.com, where you guys can actually read our articles, blogs, and all that. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and end the pod there. Thank you guys for listening to the pod. Make sure to rate and follow the pod on all whatever, you know, I think we're on all the podcast apps now. So wherever you get your podcast, make sure to, you know, subscribe, follow, leave a rating. It really helps the podcast grow. And you guys can catch us on the next pod. Peace.